Although we've dealt with the history panel on the left hand side a little bit throughout these videos, let's take a look at it in a little more detail. I'm going to open up the history palette, and at the moment all we have in there is one step or stage, which was the opening of this image, which is a raw file, and I've opened this from the library into the develop module. When we say that the history records everything we do in Lightroom, it literally does. For example, if I were to go over here and I'm looking at the image, and the first thing I'm thinking of is that it's a little bit too blue, so I want to move my temperature up. You can see over the left hand side that it's applied the temperature change I've just put in place. But of course, when I double click to reset it because I decide that I've overdone that, it doesn't take away the temperature change we originally made, it creates the new one. So even now we've already got one step back to the temperature change, and we can step back to the original. Now it does this even if we was doing a split toning technique. Let's take a look at that. Because if I move the hue, we can see that is recorded in the history. Then if I move the saturation, that's recorded in the history. Well, if we was applying these sorts of changes to an image, it's not uncommon, is it, for me to make the 4 changes there, and that's just to get myself somewhere close to where I want. Then I can start to balance, I can start to fine tune. So it doesn't take too long before we've got quite a list in our history palette. So you need to be aware of that, because sometimes when you open up the history palette, if it's been closed for some while, you can be quite surprised by the number of changes we've actually made. And of course, when we're new to the software and we're playing with it to some degree, they're going to get even longer, or that list is going to get longer. I'll reset those and we'll move back to the basic tab. In real world, of course, I may want to just take a little bit of that coolness away with the temperature. I may want to increase the exposure a little bit. I may want to add a bit of clarity. I may want to add a bit of vibrance, and all manner of other changes, as you know, including the other tools that we've looked at, such as the adjustment brush, the radial filter, the graduated filter, and more. Now, it's not uncommon to make a change, and even do so by accident sometimes. I use a graphics tablet. With a graphics tablet, you don't have to physically touch a left mouse to drag one of these sliders down. So if I'm looking over the left of the screen and not paying attention, I can find all sorts of odd things happening. Well, we can use the history to go back, because you can see the black clipping that I've hit by accident is at the top of the list. But don't forget too, we've got a nice neat shortcut key of Ctrl-Z, and that will also take a backward step. But I can hit that Ctrl-Z a number of times, and if you keep your eye on the history, you can see I can gradually take away all of those changes we've made back to a point where I want to pick up from. But I think that may be more useful if we were working with all of the palettes hidden. Now, you know that's one of my favorites. Shift tab, we remove all the palettes apart from the one on the right. We make a change and we realize we've done the wrong thing. Well, we can hit Ctrl-Z and we can undo that, or we can hit Ctrl-Z and undo a number of changes. Now, if we are going to manipulate an image, and the image we're manipulating is one of the more tricky ones, in other words, we need to make lots of changes, because many of the manipulations we make in our images, it's quite rare these days to make one change that's going to give your image the wow value you're looking for. What tends to happen, in my experience, is we make 10 or 20 small changes. Each one of them individually is not a great step forward, but collectively they can be massive. So it's not going to be uncommon to end up here with quite a huge list down the left hand side, and with a scroll bar to be able to scroll down those as well. So from time to time, if we're working through an image And we do find that things are getting a little slow, and if we've got a modern computer we probably won't notice any problem at all. But let's just assume we do notice a little bit of a problem. Sometimes if we were to pick up the graduated filter, for example, and we click to drag it down, where it's coming down here lovely and smooth and it reacts to my cursor instantly, if you suddenly find that perhaps that's hanging back, and when I drag down nothing happens, and then the bounding box you can see here then jumps a second later, perhaps it's an indicator that we're getting just a little too much pressure on our PC. Now what I'll do here is come away from that tool because we don't really want to use it. What we can do under those circumstances, and I'll push the colours up here so we can see we're not about to change this. So we've got some strong colour there. What I can do is go to my history and I can mouse over the cross, and you can see the little tip that comes up. It says clear the history steps. Now when I do that, it does clear the history steps, but of course it doesn't alter the picture. So what we've done is we've said to our software, look, we're happy with what we've done up to this point. We're pretty confident we don't want to go back. It's slowing me down just a little bit, so please clear those out of your memory and then we can continue. And as we begin to do that, we'll see the changes start to build up in the history again every time we touch a slider or a technique within the software we're using. And by clearing the history, even though I'm saying yes, clear the history but leave the image, we still don't lose the ability to go down here and reset right the way back to the start, because we're working in Lightroom and everything we do is non-destructive. Now the next video I'm about to record is the one we're going to deal with snapshots, and they can be used sort of in conjunction with history. So it wouldn't be a bad idea to watch that video next if you're not intending to do so.